Good evening, everyone. So, the smell of damp stayed on my clothes for the rest of the day. The state of the flat was appalling. The doors hung off the kitchen cupboards, and the bathroom looked like something you would expect to see in a squat. Before the Fed stepped in to help these clients, they had no fridge or freezer. They were surviving on microwave food from tins and packets. Shopping for fresh food was simply not an option. Both of them were in their 80s, no other family in the world other than a disabled daughter living in a care home. And they'd been pawning their sentimental jewellery to survive, too proud to ask for help. And I sat in front of them. The lady was the same age as my mum, and it broke my heart. And that visit was made very soon after I joined the Fed in April of 2019. And it was the first one that I'd ever made alongside one of my social work colleagues. And I have to say, it shocked me to the core, and it gave me sleepless nights. For this couple, however, there was a happy ending. Our wonderful colleagues in our community advice and support team, CAST, the Fed social work team, secured many years of pension credit back pay for them, as well as new white goods. And so these immensely proud, resilient people were now able to live the rest of their lives in dignity. More recently, I went to visit a lady called Marjorie at home. Marjorie was a Jewish patient in her mid-60s who was admitted to our discharge to assess unit at Heathlands. She was very poorly. She had a diagnosis of terminal cancer. And Lucy, one of our social workers, was appointed to conduct an assessment which revealed that Marjorie and her older sister Elaine, with whom she usually lived, were surviving in absolutely terrible conditions. And without suggesting any blame, there was clear evidence of self-neglect. Their financial circumstances were dire. The house they shared was damp and dilapidated. The kitchen units in this house as well were falling apart. The fridge and washing machine were both broken, and this meant that they couldn't keep any fresh food as well. And Marjorie's sister was having to wash clothes and bed sheets in the bath. And when you have a sister who's suffering from terminal cancer, who's bedridden and needs sheets changing on a regular basis, to be bending over at her age in the bath was, not hygienic and really hard for her. The oven door was hanging off, the sink was leaking, and there was no food in the cupboards. It really was horrible. And again, they had no one, no family, no friends to look out for them. And I'm looking out around this room tonight, and you're all a group of friends. You all know each other. Some of you are related. And so many of our clients that we support have not one other family member in the world. Marjorie's declining health over recent years and now her terminal illness had resulted in her becoming incapable of managing her own needs, running the home, and caring for Elaine, who herself had learning difficulties and was registered disabled. For her own part, Elaine, with all these limitations, had been doing her utmost to keep things going, but had found it very, very hard. And again, I can't begin to tell you how deeply affected I was to witness their miserable circumstances, to sit in their house, to see the state of their house and their social isolation. And talking to Marjorie, I can remember it as clear as yesterday, as she lay in her bed downstairs, she was so ill and so weak. And I'm looking around the room, and there are pictures of her on the wall. And from 10 or 15 years ago, she was this attractive, vivacious woman. And now she was terminally ill with no other family and nobody to help her. It was just Elaine, who she had always cared for. And it was devastating. Assessing their circumstances and figuring out what help they needed was a very tricky process, hugely complicated by Elaine's learning difficulties, heightened anxiety, and certain obsessive thought processes which threw up so many obstacles to what should have been a fairly simple discussion and agreement. And Lucy, our social worker, spent an hour and a half gently advising the sisters. It was hard going, it really was. She needed Elaine to understand the importance of seeing that Marjorie's nutritional needs were met, because when she went shopping, she would bring home, scones and cream, but not healthy nutritional food. They needed to discuss how and where to install a TV in Marjorie's bedroom. And her patience and professionalism was incredible. She was kind, she was unflappable, she was tolerantly repeating the same things over and over to make sure that Elaine completely understood. And I've got to tell you that as a mere observer, I was drained by that conversation. But Lucy's supreme efforts meant that Marjorie's circumstances were immeasurably improved. The new TV, as simple as it might sound, opened up her life. Her days were no longer spent just looking out of the window and listening to the radio. So many of their basic needs, ones that we all here take for granted, were addressed. Emergency food provision was arranged, and within days, a number of amazing donors had answered our call to finance the purchase of new appliances, an oven, fridge freezer, washing machine, and cover the costs of repairing the leaking kitchen sink, checking over the electrics and the roof tiles, unblocking the gutters to address the awful damp and mould affecting the property. I remember going upstairs, I was shown around, and literally the windows and the roof, it was just falling apart. It was horrible. So Lucy helped the sisters access welfare benefits as well, which they had no idea they were entitled to, or actually how they could apply for them. If you can think navigating universal credit is a very complicated thing, probably for most of us in this room, never mind other people. Their weekly income was substantially increased, which made a huge difference to them. And she referred them to our volunteer services team, who arranged shopping and befriending support so Marjorie could enjoy regular human contact. Sadly, Marjorie passed away 4 weeks ago. She and Elaine were alone in the world until they turned to the Fed. Our intervention enabled Marjorie's last few months to be lived in comfort and dignity in a way that all of us here tonight take for granted. And as the community safety net, we, the Fed, changed all that. And I wish I could say that these cases were one-offs. Sadly, that could not be further from the truth. Tragically, for thousands of Jewish people across all ages, across Greater Manchester, that struggle with issues such as poverty, mental health, disability, isolation, and abuse is a daily fact of life. As Mark referenced, when I started work at the Fed, I thought I had a good idea of the type of work that we dealt with. Of course, I knew about Heathlands Village. I used to go there when I was 14 years old and visit people, and I knew about the state-of-the-art care that our elderly received there. I knew the Fed helped older people in our community too through befriending and shopping. But it turns out that I knew a mere fraction of the whole, and I wasn't the only one. So I decided that I wanted to make it my mission to inform the community, your community, you, of the harsh reality that affects thousands of our fellow Jews. I wanted to undertake to ensure that the community would have a far greater understanding of why supporting the Fed, a charity which helps people from cradle to grave, is so important. The amount of social need is heartbreaking, it's real, and it's increasing. As the Director of Fundraising and Marketing for the Fed is Manchester's largest Jewish charity, I'm responsible for ensuring that we raise a staggering £1.9 million this year to balance our books, maintain our crucial support for the thousands, the 6,500 Jews in our community who rely on us now, or who will come to rely on us in the next 12 months. That figure has increased from £1.5 million in just 1 year. And alongside that is another challenge. It's to develop the philanthropic leadership of tomorrow. We really have to encourage more of our community's younger generation to start to pick up the responsibility which has rested for so long on the shoulders of our older generations. Whilst we live in a multicultural society and many of us support mainstream causes, history has sadly taught us that if we as Jews do not look after our own, no one else will. Ensuring that our younger generations appreciate this fact is, for me, a passion and a priority. I'm often asked if the amount of money the Fed needs to raise scares me, and it doesn't. What scares me is the thought of what will happen to the thousands of our fellow Mancunian Jews if the Fed does not raise that money. It keeps me awake at night, and it's what drives me each and every day. And it's why we, as an organisation, as a community, dare not rest for a single minute. The 3 years since I joined the Fed have flown by. I really do consider myself incredibly fortunate to do a job which feeds my stomach and my soul, and I feel incredibly privileged to be able to do this work. I'm privileged to work with such inspiring colleagues, donors, and volunteers whose selflessness never ceases to amaze me and often leaves me feeling incredibly humbled. Together, we create and shape the services that the Fed provides. You are all here tonight because clearly our Manchester Jewish community is important to you. Together, we can ensure a strong, resilient safety net that for our community is maintained. But it's only together with you, our supporters, that we can ensure that it remains so. So thank you very much for joining us.